Substack is an awesome way to break the ice, which naturally attracts people that have common interests. Sometimes you do an experiment because it just interests you and it's fun, but then you hear from the market, like, is this interesting? And when you get like a nice signal, you're like, I'm onto something. And a lot of those experiments you wouldn't necessarily take because you feel like the success has to be built in, otherwise you're not going to try it. And there's so much to learn from going out on a limb and jumping and seeing if you can land.
You are listening to Sharp Strategies, Sweet Success.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. You're listening to Sharp Strategies, Sweet Success. I'm your host, Tiffany Swedensky, and today I'm talking with Thomas Martin. And Thomas, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners?
Hey, Tiffany. Hey, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on the show. It was great having you on my show earlier. And yeah, just really excited to have a conversation with you, learn more about your audience, and take it from there.
Because I love Substack. I absolutely love Substack. And I have a really hard time getting other people, I feel like, as excited as they should be. Can you talk about how you're using that and how you think like attorneys could use it?
Yeah, 100%. So I've been into legal tech and doing the legal AI thing for 10 years now, but I've been a lawyer for 25 years. I think that lawyers too often, they have this mindset of this transactional mindset, like a one-to-one thing. Right? Where they think, oh, Substack, interesting. Will I get clients from it? Like I post a video and then I get a client? That's not how it works. That's usually not how life works too. Even if you're going out and you're single and you're looking to meet somebody, you don't like walk up to somebody immediately and go, hey, so gonna go out on a date with me? It's like, it's awkward. Like people don't work that way. You kind of got to break the ice and get to know people. And it's the same thing. Substack is an awesome way to break the ice, which naturally attracts people that have common interests.
I think it's a big fear if Henry Cavill came up to me and say, hey, do you want to go on a date? That would probably work, if I'm being honest. It would probably work immediately. Maybe we shouldn't get into this, but I hear that a lot about attorneys. I try not to put people in buckets. I honestly do. I try not to treat like all attorneys the same, but you do kind of see a certain pattern in the people who go after this career and also people who become lawyers and then open up their own business. Would you say that that's purely a roadblock here? Oh, attorneys are just very transactional in how they view things, or is it something else?
I think most all of it, probably 80% of it is in your head. There's way too many roadblocks that we put in front of ourselves. That's a big problem. But yeah, some of it is real. Some of it's practical. There's tools you have to use to actually do stuff like this or to write and publish on Substack. And so you have to get familiar with how that works and how to do it, or maybe just hire people to help you do it. So I think they're all achievable. You can overcome all of those barriers.
What would you recommend that they post? Because we did a podcast together, and I'm pretty sure you write on Substack as well. What kind of content do you think attorneys should be making? And how do you explain that to them? How do you say you should be writing articles? No, it won't get you clients, but how do you fill in that gap?
Yeah. So here's the thing. I know the natural groove in lawyers' minds would be, oh, well, I do probate or I do estate planning. So I'm going to write, or I'm going to have podcasts like this, or I'm going to write about things to think about when you put together your estate plan, or what is a living trust? Those are the obvious ways to do it. And I'm not saying not to do that because some people might just look that up and find you. But I think our example is an example of how you reach people through like adjacent means, like through happenstance, through kismet. Because I focus on legal tech, I'm a lawyer, I like to think about, but I'm also like a philosophy undergrad. So I like to think about different concepts and psychological things and tricks and stuff. And I just happened upon your post. And it wasn't the actual Substack article. It was a clip, like a little video that you put together about the gentleman amnesia effect and the doorman. I forget if it's called irony or what happened.
Fallacy.
Fallacy, yeah, the doorman.
Yeah.
And you could look those up on Tiffany's Substack if you want to learn more about those. But they intrigued me. And because they intrigued me, I wanted to learn more about Tiffany. And when I learned more about Tiffany, I thought what she was doing was kind of cool. And so for a lawyer, how does that translate? It means you don't directly write about, or not only write about your subject expertise, but you write about human stuff that you like thinking about because other people might think it's interesting too.
That's so true. And I mean, every day I wake up and think, wow, I could be really doing more with that Substack. I'm just so busy with the actual going on in my business. But it is incredible if you get out of your own way, like you said, and you record a video. When I do videos for Substack, most of the time I don't have a script. At best, I have an outline where I know what points I want to hit, so I just don't get completely off track. But once I started making those videos, each one is easier and easier and easier. And you're right, it does work that way. You saw that video shortly after I posted it too. You reached out, we're talking again here, and that's how human connections form. And I think that's so important on social media right now. I've historically have had a tremendously difficult time getting, well, maybe not all business owners, but particularly attorneys excited about social media because there is that transactional mindset. Oh, how is this going to get me a case? It's kind of indirect and it happens behind the scenes. It's so amorphous. It's hard to like convince people that that is actually how it works. And it's kind of cool. Do you do socials outside of Substack or are you primarily on that platform?
I think the number one place is LinkedIn,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, because so many lawyers live on LinkedIn and they're posting about what they're up to. Of course, there's a lot of posts, humble brags about achievements and stuff like that. But every once in a while, you see a pretty like intriguing, interesting post that you dive into. And so I cross post my Substack articles onto LinkedIn to get people to understand what I'm working on. And of course, there's Blue Sky, X, and every other place that I highly recommend either cross-posting to, or there's different context for it, right? Twitter used to be somewhat dead for legal tech, and now it's really roaring back. And so I love going on there to just, people are sharing tea, or they're just cool insight that they came up with where they just want to throw it out there real quick. So I'd say like experiment, engage, be curious, and get out there.
Side because every day I say to myself, I'm glad there's no compelling reason for me to consider X or Twitter as part of what I do for my business. But you just made it sound there probably is. Gosh, you gave me more work to do, and I kind of hate that.
Sorry about that.
There's so many social media platforms, they really are. But you focus on LinkedIn. That does a lot for you as a lawyer in particular. Do you feel like you get a lot of referrals from that, cases from that? Or what benefit, I guess?
I guess the benefit really is that's where my community talks and lives and chats. I think the one thing that sucks is that I can't keep up with it. There's too much stuff going on, too many people that I like are posting stuff, and I don't get to keep up with it. And sometimes, if you've been on LinkedIn quite a bit, you'll see that it notoriously now is posting stuff from like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I'm not sure why, but kind of nice that it does sometimes because I'll see something from 3 weeks ago from like this person I really like and follow, and I'm, oh my God, I missed this. So there's just way too much content to keep up with.
And also, it's amazing how these algorithms put you into like silos because I was just thinking for my LinkedIn feed, just what I scroll through and the content I see, it is just so much about AI. I'm sick of it, kind of. I'm sick of talking about it a little bit. I want news about it, but it's every post. And it occurred to me, I programmed it to do this. For the last 3 years, it's basically all marketers have cared about, more or less. And so it's just amazing how you can get into these micro niches within each platform and find kind of your group almost and start to build a following there, which I think is just super cool. I think that's what's really cool about marketing today versus when it was really heavy on SEO, PPC, and direct response marketing, more or less.
Yeah, I forget who the author is of this book, but a while back, there was a book called Feed a Starving Crowd. And the main concept, as you could tell, is that you find your people that really absolutely have a painful need for what you're offering. And if you could find those people, then it's a great product market fit, to put it in business terms. But it's also, hey, these are people that are interested in what you're interested in and would love to learn from you. And it's a great dynamic. And the fact that the algorithm could do that for us without us having to do the heavy lifting is a nice benefit too.
It kind of just occurred to me. I should have asked you more about your firm. So, like, tell me about your firm. Where are you guys at? I guess, honestly, I just don't know.
Yeah, so it's been an interesting journey. I've been a lawyer, like I said, for over 25 years. I've had my own firm that I launched in 2006, which is called Foresight Legal Group, and one of the first online law firms in the United States. I'm licensed in California because I'm originally from California, but the focus of my energies kind of moved over to legal AI about 10 years ago. So I still run the firm. I have some wonderful attorneys that make it possible for me to just manage the strategy and finances and stuff like that. But primarily I've been focused on LawDroid, my legal AI company. And yeah, it's been really rewarding. I mean, 10 years ago, everyone was kind of like nodding off when I would talk about AI. It certainly has their attention now.
It's funny because I remember 2018, I did a presentation to a room full of attorneys where I was talking about natural language processing and how Google uses natural language processing to interpret search queries. And so it's not about keywords. I was trying really hard to explain it, probably doing a terrible job in my own way. And so many years later, that's what we're talking about. That's the underpinning to what we have with the large language models today. And it's really cool. And I had very similar experiences. It's been around for a while, but people seem like just didn't get it until ChatGPT, which kind of incredible when you think about it.
Yeah, it's when the tools become easy for everyone to experiment with and use and get familiar with. Sometimes it's about the form, it's about the UI. There's just something about it that makes it approachable, and then interest explodes.
So that's what I see a lot with the Claude automation. I'll have to confess something I probably shouldn't. I haven't played around in Claude that much, but I've talked to people who have and what they're setting up, and I'm just, oh, user automations. You do this, do that. And it's stuff that a lot of people were doing before, but a super small group of people who like actually knew how to code, actually knew how to like program and stuff. And it's just way more accessible. And so, yeah, the interest has exploded with people's ability to engage with it and understand it, where I felt like kind of the same thing with natural language processing. It was just hard to get people excited about it. But yeah, it's kind of incredible how much that single AI tool has taken over in the last couple weeks. It's kind of neat. So as far as like LawDroid and like so is it a tool? Is it a service? Is coaching? Could you like explain a little bit more about what y'all do?
Yeah, happy to talk about LawDroid a little bit. So currently, we do a mix of consulting and building. And especially right now with law firms, lawyers, legal aid organizations, state courts out there trying to figure out how to make best use of AI. Because we've been ahead of the curve for a while, we've learned how to do it and been really blessed to work with many amazing partners who have taught us great lessons about how to make AI reliable, private, secure. And so having handled a lot of those concerns that lawyers have naturally and finding a way through it. Mostly right now, it's building and consulting. It didn't start out that way though. And I think it's worthwhile for lawyers or your audience to hear this, is that it started out as an experiment. I just built 10 years ago a chatbot that could help somebody incorporate a business in California by just like answering 5 questions. And then it created the documents to incorporate. And I didn't do it because I was like, oh, I'm going to put this out there. I'm going to charge X amount. I'm going to make so much money. It was basically, I wanted to see if it would work. And I put it out there. I believe his name's Roland. Anyways, someone at Stanford saw it. And I got invited to present this chatbot at Stanford. And I was like, wow, there's some interest in this. So the point being is sometimes you do an experiment because it just interests you and it's fun. But then you hear from the market, is this interesting? And when you get a nice signal, you're like, I'm onto something. And a lot of those experiments you wouldn't necessarily take because you feel the success has to be built in, otherwise you're not going to try it. And there's so much to learn from going out on a limb and jumping and seeing if you could land. You have to find your way. And it's a little scary, but the rewards are great.
I have a little bit of regret not having enough of that time to lay around and what can be done, because truly a lot can be done with a lot of these tools and a lot can be probably streamlined. I just haven't even gotten to yet. And so that's an exciting place to be. You come out about the same time when I first got started in legal marketing. It was like 2015. There was a lot of chatter, and it was out of San Diego naturally, about basically a bot who would contest a ticket for you. And I think it was mostly parking tickets. Is this about the same time?
Yeah, it was just after that. And actually, he was my inspiration. Joshua Browder, who actually at the time was a teenager in London, England. And again, my knowing about him came from me having a Google alert for different like things having to do with AI and just legal and technology. There was no legal tech yet. It was just legal and technology and stuff. And his article came up about this kid in London who put a chatbot together that helped people get out of parking tickets by appealing them through a chatbot. And this tells you how nerdy I am. But for me, it was like, oh my God, this is a revelation, because not only could you automate documents like LegalZoom, but now you could automate legal information. And I thought, wow, if you could combine those two things, we're really going somewhere. And that's why I jumped headfirst into LawDroid.
Didn't it scare you, or does it scare you? Do you just see yourself moving and doing something different? I guess that's me for sure. There's some fear here. And then I don't know. I mean, how do you think about that? I'm curious.
I think that it's very natural to be fearful of it because it's different and we don't know where we're going, right? So that's the part that's scary. And I think it plays into that psychology where you're not going to do something unless you know it's going to be successful. So if it's an unknown, well, I don't know that it's going to be successful. So that's kind of even more scary. And we're just in a place where we don't know where it's going to go. And we just need to plan for the best and hope for the best, and also find ways of learning what's actually happening. Because the more that we know about what's actually happening and how it works, the less fearful we're going to be, because we still can maintain some understanding and control over what's happening. And it's unfortunate right now that the control over these systems is in the hands of too few. But the way to get it in the hands of many and more is, I think, open source systems, open source AI models are amazing. What they could do now is just head and shoulders above what they could do a year ago. They're doing stuff very close to like foundation models like Anthropic and OpenAI. And you can own those. You could download those and you could own them yourself and not have to rent from the foundation model companies. So that's a big change in how things are going.
I think about that a fair bit. And I really like the idea. And me and a buddy were talking years ago about how we would move to a future where each home has like its own, essentially a server. And we weren't talking about like AI agents at the time, but we were talking about cloud storage. We were talking about smart devices and things like that. And we just kind of felt like that's the direction we were moving to. And so what you just talked about, this idea of having your own agent using these open source models and fully owning it, I love that idea. And actually, you probably know about this, and maybe I'm just telling my listeners, but you can even buy devices where you don't have to depend on Google or Apple for cloud storage. You can actually host your own cloud storage in your home. And it's expensive. You have to set it up and maintain a dedicated internet connection, but I'm sure it saves tremendously over time. And I think that's so cool.
Actually, some of the storage that you can get right now is pretty inexpensive. Underneath my desk right now, I have a 4 terabyte hard drive, but it's a solid state. So it's literally like the size of your phone, and it could hold 4 terabytes, which is a ton of images and information. And you could even hook into it from somewhere else by using the internet. These things are and by the way, that costs under $200. So totally affordable. The local AI systems that are available now, if you wanted to run it on your own little supercomputer, it is a little expensive right now. There's one from NVIDIA called DGX Spark, and that one costs around $5,000. But when you think like back in the day, getting a computer like in the 80s or 90s, so aging myself, it was close to $5,000. Which back then, that's a crazy amount of money. Not too shabby that you could actually have your own personal AI running on your desktop for that.
I'm going to have to look at the cloud storage device I was checking out because it was like $500. And I'm like, wait a minute. If they're cheaper, I need to know that before I buy anything. But I was born in the late 80s. So I do remember that. I remember how expensive it was to get a phone, how rare it was to be able to afford a computer in your home. Like only the rich people had that when I was a kid, but I was a poor kid. So the bar was kind of low. And I watch Price is Right reruns on Amazon, and it's not just how prices have gone up for ordinary things, but how something that's kind of cheap now, like an electronic, was actually tremendously expensive, and it was a big deal that you got it. And I thought, oh, it's kind of neat. And the economics of how much it's still super expensive, but like comparatively, not really. Like technology costs haven't exactly risen with inflation based on where we were at when we got started. So I guess just more chips. That's what NVIDIA is doing, is more chips.
And by the way, those prices are really going to come down like they usually do. And the reason why is like, if you look forward a little bit, like there's a company right now that's making AI on a chip. And so like that company, once you get AI on a chip, it's going to be so small that you don't need to have like the little desktop version that's $5,000. It's going to be that you could have it on your phone or you could have it anywhere. And it's going to be like the couple $100 like that solid state drive is now.
I really like that idea. And I feel because you touched on AI security, and well, we don't have a whole lot of time, but I would like you to teach me something about that because that worries me. And I forgot actually what I was going to spin off and say. So let's just go there. Like, as far as like security goes, what we're sharing with these huge companies and how we're kind of helping them train their models. What are you telling law firms? What should they know?
Well, I think the number one thing, the biggest win for anyone watching this that you may not know about, but if you do know about it and you've already done it, good for you. But the biggest win I think right now is if you're using ChatGPT or if you're using Claude, you want to go into your settings, and then there's one that has to do with privacy or data controls. And it's a little confusing the way they label it because you'll see a little, and I think they both label it the same way. It says improve the AI model for everyone. And so it's a little tricky because, of course, we all want to, at some level, be people pleasing. We want to not be the source of friction or whatever. So you see improve the model for everyone. You're like, I want to help out. But actually what that's doing is allowing them to train on your data. And you don't want that because the risk of training on your data is that it could ultimately become part of their like public database, essentially. So you got to turn that off. And if you turn that off, they will not be training on your data. So that's at least a big first step in protecting your privacy and security.
That's usually the setting. I've been around for a while. That's usually the kind of settings I check for when I'm looking in these tools. And ChatGPT, yeah, I'm going to have to double check. I need to make sure. But Microsoft is like that too. You have to give Microsoft basically a ton of control over your office space and data to be able to use some of their, I think it's called Copilot, their Copilot creativity features. And honestly, these days I'm writing by hand. I don't want you to steal my intellectual property. I'm terrible like that. So as far as the AI tools that most law firms are using in-house, ones that are reviewing medical records, ones that are summarizing documents, do you feel like the companies putting those out are they as secure as they seem? Or how would you know?
Well, you definitely have to ask questions. It's unlikely that you're going to get them to actually agree to some kind of new side agreement when it comes to privacy, security, and what have you, but at least to become familiar with what their terms are for how they deal with it. So some questions you want to ask them are, do you retain the data? Okay, you're not going to train on the data, but do you retain it? And if you do, for how long and for what purpose? OpenAI and ChatGPT, even if you use their API so that you're not using like the consumer app, but you're actually using it behind the scenes with their API, they'll retain it for about 30 days. They say that they're retaining it for 30 days because there might be some support issue. So that's pretty natural. And that's actually what we do at LawDroid, is that we have it just in case a question comes up about something in the past, we could look it up. So that's not too bad. But there's also another option that is different than that called zero data retention, or ZDR. And so naturally lawyers would love to have that because you don't retain my data at all. But that's not always an option. Through the API, you can't get that by default. With OpenAI and ChatGPT, you have to separately get that with like an enterprise contract. So you're talking about a lot more money to be able to have ZDR. However, this is one place where like open source models come to the rescue, because if you use an open source, which could be as powerful as, let's say, like 6 months ago foundation models, they, with a provider like Together AI, Open Router, which offer those open models, they usually have by default ZDR. So they're not retaining your data. So you look at those different options, you ask questions, find out how they're dealing with the data. Privacy, you also want to make sure the basics, you're not writing your password on a Post-it note that someone else can see, that you're not sharing it through email. I know a lot of us do that, don't do that. And that you know who has access, and you keep people out that you don't want to see it. Encryption is also a basic one where you want to ask them questions about, when I send you the information, is that through an encrypted connection? When you store it and you store it for the 30 days or whatever, is it also like stored in an encrypted format? And what that means is, let's say the bad actor breaks into their database, sees your stuff that's stored there for 30 days. If it's encrypted, they'll just see gobbledygook. They won't be able to read it. So you want to ask them if they encrypt their data at rest. And so there's all these like different questions that feel weird and unnatural for lawyers to ask because it sounds very like techie and data oriented, but those are some basics. Data encryption, privacy, storage, training, but good questions to ask.
Let's say there's a SaaS tool and it's using Claude API, like I guess Anthropic. I don't know too much more about how that's being used. I don't know too like the account they're using or anything like that. Is that something that's risky? I actually don't know. Is that something that's like risky? Is it probably okay? What would you say about that?
So like a lawyer, right, it would depend on the specifics of that specific vendor. But in general, if it's a SaaS legal tech product, they're likely using the API. And if they're using the API, the default is that they're not training on the data, but also the default is they're likely retaining the data for 30 days. Sometimes people don't think about, well, okay, OpenAI or Anthropic is retaining my data, but how long do you, vendor, retain my data? And that's a good question too. I would also point out, I think a lot of lawyers, they get scared about retaining data unnecessarily. Because the question should really be, do they, the lawyer or law firm, do you have control over when you can get rid of the data is the more important question, not how long. If you yourself can go into the app and every week, every 30 days, whatever the pace is that you want to get rid of the data, if you could do that on your own, awesome, you have control. I think the most important part is having control and understanding what controls you have.
Maybe I should ask more questions on this one. I'm the one concerned about security and I'm trying to figure out what questions to ask. Well, so I guess we're coming up to the end of our episode. So like I usually do, was there anything that we wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
You know, one thing is I'm also an adjunct professor at Suffolk Law School. And when I teach my law students, and it's a real pleasure to do that because I get to see things through fresh eyes from the questions they ask and from frankly getting to vibe off of their enthusiasm because they still have that excitement and enthusiasm about the world and about legal and what it could do. And they also have some fear though about where things are going. And I think one thing to communicate to people watching is just to try to get back into that place of curiosity and excitement and enthusiasm for the world. I know that a lot of us are just too busy working, like we're heads down and trying to like check the boxes of all the tasks we need to do. But going for a walk, spending some time out in the forest, seeing the flowers, especially right now in the summer when it's so beautiful, like that's, and of course, time with family, that's really what it's about. And I know that I personally worked for too many years, too long in the office and missed a lot. So try to keep your own priorities or your time, try to keep your time and investment in time reflecting your own personal priorities rather than it being flipped the other way.
I think that's so important. Such an important lesson. I'm learning it every day, I feel like. Thank you so much for being on the show. Where would you like people to look you up and learn more about you?
Well, thank you so much, Tiffany, for having me on the show. There's two ways. They could look me up on LinkedIn. It's Thomas G. Martin on LinkedIn, and also LawDroid.ai is where you could find my company.
Well, thanks so much again. Thanks everyone for listening, and we will see everyone next time.